This is Gemara and Taanis Daf Yomi learning Shvius L'Shiv Yisrael Midor Shemers Esav Shan Michael Mordechai Midav Shin Aziku Basav Shendel as well as L'Shvur Hashem Shal Yosef Any Vedim and Meveg Chaim Mitzar Sham Simon Reizes Dor Baskin Tigit Basim As Chayiv So Yisrael Minder LeRetz Shalei Sham As Nami Vashavik Shechana Shmo Antil Dino Chan Reizem Chaim Asino Dinin Vishin Mindas Shiv Vegor Nechel Nasu Nazel Huva Rivkov Sheva Avzal Sibim Mechel Esther. We are holding on the bottom of Yud Gimel Amud Beis. We're in the middle of a bit of a lengthy discussion concerning where indeed you insert the tefillah of Anenu. Is it between Goyel and Roifei, between the brachas of Barich Aleinu and Rifeinu and Re'eh? Is it over there its own bracha, or is it in Shemei Tefillah part of the bracha? And the basic idea boils down to, can a Yachid say his own bracha? As you see highlighted in front of you, about 15 lines in the white lines, the Gemara said Heichan Amra, and the Gemara said Bin Goyel L'Raifei. It's its own bracha. On that, Rav Yitzchak was bothered. How could that be? A Yachid makes his own bracha? Rather, Rav Yitzchak said it's in Shemei Tefillah. And we're in the middle of a lengthy back and forth, which is really going to continue all the way until Amud Aleph, trying to prove whether indeed Rav Yitzchak is correct, it's in Shemei Tefillah, or the Havamina was correct, and it's between Goyel and Roifei. The question that we had on Rav Yitzchak was a brisa. And the brisa seemingly said that Yachid is able to be Kaveh bracha for himself. And if a Yachid could make a singular person could have its own bracha, then Rav Yitzchak has no reason to change and put it in Shemei Tefillah. It's perfectly fine between Goyel and Roifei. On that, 3 lines in the wide lines, the Gemara answered, really referring to the Shliach Sibur. And you're going to ask, Shliach Sibur, Esrim Arba, Masi, Begum, Tanis, Vishaynis. It's like Esrim Arba. So we said it's talking about the first 3 fast days, they're not 24. The question was, what do you mean, Ein Bain? The Mishnah clearly says, let's pick it up from there in the first wide line. Ein Bain, Gedani, Ein Bain, Gimel, Vishaynis. And it sounds like, with regard to saying the amount of bracha, the first and second fast are equal. So what's going on? Answers the Gemara, the classical Gemara Teretz, Tana V'Shayir. Let's just explain what that means. You read it fast. That means the Mishnah listed certain differences, but didn't list all of them. It left out some. So one of the differences left out was also the number of brachas. Ask the Gemara, 1 second, if it left something out, you got to prove to me what it left out. Ma Shire, the high Shire, what else is left out? Question number 1, find me something. Question number 2, Visu, Va'ein Bain Katani, the wordage of Ein Bain says this is the differences. Clearly there's nothing else. If I just list some items, fine. You'll tell me I left something out. But Ein Bain, this is the difference. Ella Tani B'Yisur Kamari B'Tila Loi Kamari. With those are the words we finished, that the Tana was only that's in the Yisurim. As you see 2 lines into the white lines, as the Gemara listed, Mutar Basiyas Malacha, Asurim Basiyas Malacha, talking about the Isurim, Sichan Ila Tashamita, etc. But the bracha is the tefillah it's not talking about. That was teretz number 1, an explanation of why it could actually be referring to the Chaf Daled brachas. V'ba'isema, second teretz says the Gemara, you're asking me there's no difference between the middle and the latter ones, the first and the middle, says the Gemara, the middle ones, you also don't say 24 brachas. V'lo, asked the Gemara, Vatanya, we learned in a brisa, Ein Ben Gimel Shnias L'Sheva Achraynis, there's no difference between the middle 3 and the last 7. Again, the 3 fast days, and 7 fast days, these are public fast days. This is aside for the original 3 of the Yechidim. But we see now that the middle 3 are no different than the last 7. These we blow shofar and we shut the stores. Sounds like for everything else, they're perfectly equal. Maybe you're going to suggest again the same shach. Maybe you'll tell me you left something out. Number 1, it says Ein Bain, that there's no differences. Says the Gemara, but Tizbra, really? Do you really think that when the Mishnah listed, the Brisa, differences between the middle 3 fast days and the last 7, and it said the only difference were blowing shofar and shutting the stores, do you really think there's no other differences? This Tizbra Ein Bain Davka. Do you really think there's no other differences as we turn over to Yadalit Amar Aleph, V'Shayir Tevas? We'll see in tomorrow's Daf, as we'll see in the next parak, the first Mishnah, we'll see that in the latter fast days, what do? They took the Teva, they took the Aron Kodesh, and they brought brought it out to the town square, and that was only by the last 7, and it clearly doesn't list that in the Brisa. Says the Gemara, no. That's not called leaving something out. Why not? Because the Brisa only listed the differences between the things that you do in private, the eating, the drinking, the malacha, but that which you do in public, the Brisa didn't list at all. Now the Gemara says, Amar Rav Ashi masnisa nami deka. Says Rav Ashi, indeed the 24 brachos are said during the middle fast days. How do I know? Diktani ma elu yisiris al yishaynos. What are these greater than the first ones? It sounds like the only difference is shutting the stores and blowing shofar. Everything else is the same. So clearly you did say 24 brachas to chitim, maybe you're going to suggest maybe they also left out something of this brisa. Again, the words of ma'elu seem these are the items. The Gemara has the same question. Now again, we're going to have the exact same shakvataria. This is going in Rav Ashi, who's trying to prove it from the Mishnah. Says the Gemara, Tizbra, do you really think Ma'ilu Dafka to only these? Vashayar Leiteva. We left out bringing the Aron Kodesh to the town square. Says the Gemara, Misham Teva Lav Shura, Misham Nikachashav La, Bedach Perka. You know why Teva's not leaving out? Why didn't our Mishnah list it? You know why? Because it's in the next Mishnah. And if it's in the next Mishnah, why do we have to listen to our Mishnah? Says the Gemara, beautiful. Hashtad Asis Achi. Now that you came with this new idea, what new idea? That we don't have to list everything in our parak because there's certain things we leave for the next parak. The fact that it didn't list the 24 brachas is also not a shiuru. The fact that they're said during the last 7 fast days, implying that they're not said by the middle ones, is not a shiuru. You know why? Because it lists them in the next parak, and therefore says the Gemara, it's not called leaving it out. And after this whole serious back and forth, asks the Gemara, okay, Lamaisa, my Havi Allah, bottom line, what's the story? Amar Rav Shmuel bar Sartaya, V'chein Amar Rav Chia, Amar Rav Ashi, Amar Rav, Ben Gol Raife, Rav Ashi, Amar Mishmei Rav Yana B'rei Rav Shmuel, B'Shemei Tefila, Machloikes. So where do we say Anenu b'Shemea Tefillah, and that is B'sak Halacha. So at the end of the day, we had a lengthy discourse trying to figure out where exactly is Anenu said. Is it between Gayel L'Raife, its own bracha, Kuda Yachat its own bracha? The problem was then it comes out that it's not 24, but there should be other differences. A lengthy back and forth, and the Gemara is concluding indeed it is a machlekes, but the B'sak Halacha, as we say in Shemei Tefillah, not its own bracha. Says the Gemara, Tani chada iveres menikos misanas b'rishaynais vein misanas b'achraynis. One Mishnah says pregnant woman and nursing woman fast during the first set of 3 fasties, but not during the latter set of 3. Tani idach, another brayse says misanas b'achraynis vein misanas b'rishaynais. They only fast in the latter and not in the middle. So what's going on? Which ones do they fast in? But Tani idach, we have a third brayse, ein misanas loy b'rishaynais v'loy b'achraynis, not in the beginning, not at the end. Amar Rav Ashi nakol b'msiyasa b'yalcha d'metartzin lekulu. Go with the middle one, because that answers everything, and the only fast which they're going to fast is the middle fast. Why does that answer everything? Rashi here explains beautifully. Rashi explains because the middle could be called the last of the first set, and the middle could be called the first of the last set. If I have 3 entities, I'm referring to the middle one, so this is the last after the first, but it's also the first to the last. So that reconciles the first and third brises, because this middle one is being referred to as the last of the first and the first of the last. Says the Gemara about 10 lines from the wide lines. Ma elu yisiris al rishonos. What are these added on to the first ones? They blow a shofar and they shut the stores. Says the Gemara, b'may masriin. What does it mean they blow shofar? I should say more particularly, the word masriim doesn't mean blow shofar. The word masriim means cry out. So says the Gemara, b'may masriin. What are they crying out? Rav Yudah Amar b'shayfer. Indeed, it's shayfer. Rav Yudah Breder Rav Shmuel bar Shilas b'shmei Rav Amar Banenu. So machlekes. What does crying out in the Mishnah mean? Does it mean shayfer? Does it mean the tefillah of Anenu? Says the Gemara, we think right now, we think it's a real machlek, it's mutually exclusive, each opinion doesn't hold of the other. One opinion says you blow shayfer, one opinion says you daven anenu. But ask the Gemara, how could that be? We learned in a brayso, there's no less than 7 public fast days Shabbahen on those 7 fast days. Explains the brayso explicitly. They blew shofar 18 times. So clearly there's a brayso that explicitly says on the 7 fast days you blow shofar. So we just started off and said that on these fast days you're masriin. What does masriin mean? One opinion says shofar, one opinion says anenu. Ask the Gemara, how could that be? Now the Gemara articulates the question. Utiyoftan, this is a question. Lamanda Amar Banenu. This is a problem with one that says Anenu, because clearly we see it is shofar. Says the Gemara, you are correct. You're right. In our Mishnah, when it says on these fast days we masriin, no one argues. Everyone agrees that means you blow shofar. So what was the machlek between Rav Yehuda Rav Shmuel Bar Shilas Mishmei Derav, and between Rav Yehuda? What was the machlek between shofar and anenu? Kipligi, you know where they argued? Banenu. They argued in other places. They argued in a regular tzara, not in one of the 7 public fast days. They're arguing when you say anenu in other issues, as we'll see in a moment. What do you do? That's where we have a machlekes. But other calamities that befall Klal Yisrael, we have to dive in. Do we say anenu or do we blow shofar? But you're right. In our Mishnah, everyone agrees you blow shofar. Says the Gemara in the last narrow line, Ma'asavar kar le'asra, Ma'asavar le'kar le'asra. What's the machlekes? Is that saying anenu called hatara'ah, called crying out, or is asra specifically referred to as shofar? Says the Gemara, Lamanda Rabbaninu kol shkein b'shofars. So according to the man that says the word hasra also can mean anenu. Of course, he agrees that the word itself intrinsically means shofar. He's just adding on. It could also mean anenu. So now we have a machlekes. One mandamar says either shofars or anenu. Other mandamar says only shofars. When by other tzaros or other calamities. Ask the Gemara 6 lines to the bottom of Tani learned in a brayso. It's all other calamities that could potentially fall Klal Yisrael. Scratching, chagav, locusts, vov, and you have some flies, interior or wasps, and vitushin are mosquitoes. V'shiluach lechashem akravim, and if there's snakes and scorpions, what do you do by all these dreadful things that happen? Lo haya masriin ela tzayakin. They did not masriin, rather tzayakin. What does the price clearly mean? Miditza'aka b'peh hasra b'shayfer. It's clearly honing in. You do not blow shayfer, you do with your mouth. So what do we see very clearly? How could anyone say that you blow shofar and other calamities? The Bryce explicitly says you do it with your mouth. Answers the Gemara, the classical Teretz Tanayi. You're right. It is a good question. It's machlekes Tanayim, 2 different Tanayim. The Tanya Aleilu Masriyim B'Shabbos Alir Shekvu Agiyos. If the Goyim surrounds the city or Narav Al Svinam Teres Vayam, a boat or a ship is about to drown at sea. So what do? You're Masri and you cry out even B'Shabbos. If you say Amir Lazarav for help, Avloy Litzakum not to cry out. B'mai, what does this brayso mean? That you're Masriyan on Shabbos? Even B'Shayfros, B'Shabbos Mishari? Of course it doesn't mean Shayfros. So what is the brayso referring to? Alalav, Ba'anenu v'kar le'hasra, Shema minos. We have a clear brayso that Anenu is called Asra. And we had a clear brayso a moment ago, Masriyan el Tzayakin, that Masriyan meant Shayfer. So 2 different braysos. That is the machlekes Tanayim. So at the end of the day, we're coming out that we have a machlekes, but my Masriyan, Rav Yehuda or B'Shayfer, Rav Yehuda Rav Shmuel Bar Shila says, Ba'anenu, that's a machlekes. When? A machlekes Tanayim by Shar Tzarais, whether you blow shayfer or whether you can also say anenu. Says the Gemara on the last line of Yudalon Amar Aleph, B'shnei Rav Yehuda Nesiya Havei Tzaira. In the years of Rav Yehuda Nesiya, there was a tsar, and says the Gemara as we turn over to Amar Beis, what did Rav Yehuda Nesiya do? Gazar Tzlases Reitaniyos V'lo Ani. He made 13 fast days, and unfortunately they were not answered. Savar, he thought let's make more fast days. We need to get an answer from Hashem. They say, the Chachamim say, that's too much. You can't do more than that. So you can't do more than 13 fast days. When Rav Ami said not to do it, it was for himself because he couldn't handle the fast days. But indeed, by rain, you're right, there's an end, there's a cap, how many fasts? By other tzarais, you keep on davening and fasting until you get an answer from Shamayim. Tanya Nami Hachi, says the Gemara, and this is indeed proved by a Braisa, all of the calamities, we fast until we get an answer. Says the Gemara, Lema Davi Tiyufta Deravami. Let's say this is a Tiyufta Deravami. Why is this a Tiyufta Deravami? Because what did Ravami say in the second line? Said Ravami, no, don't be Matriach Litzibur. You're not allowed to do more than 13 ever. Whether it's rain, whether it's something else. We asked on Ravami, you're doing this for yourself. But clearly Ravami said this statement and he meant it. So says the Gemara, this previous verse says a Kashan Ravami. Ravami Tanoi, it is a Machlekes Tanoim again. The Tanya and guys in Yosef Mishal Tanias Al Tzibur. Why not? Lafi she'ein on the first wide line. Ma'atrichan al tzibur Yosef midai. Divrei Rabbi of Shem Gamliel Leimer. Loi min Hashem uzel. Sheyatza zman shel Ravia. You know why you don't do it anymore? Because the time of rain has passed. So Rav Shimon Gamliel says it's specifically it didn't rain, whereas the first opinion says it's all. Everything, we're not matrichin the tzibur yoser midai. Says the Gemara, let's go back to Shemon Esrei, let's go back to where we're inserting this tefillah for rain. Shol chulei b'neinin ve'le Rabbi kigoynanan, like us. That tefillah b'tuvas Tammuz, the middle of the summer. Bina Mitra, we need rain in the summer. What are we supposed to do? Where do we daven for rain in the summer? What does that mean? Are we like singular people? And therefore, where should we say the tefillah? We should say it in are we like the public and we say regular Baruch Aleinu, we say the same Talumatar? Answers the Gemara, and you say in Shemei Tefillah. And of course, what we see from here is the known halacha, as we mentioned in the past, in the beginning of the Masechta, that if you were to miss the same Talumatar, you always can make it up in Shemei Tefillah. As you see over here, Yechidim say it in Shemei Tefillah. And as well, this is the precursor from the opinion of, for example, of Chaim Pichashaimer, that he used to tell the Bachram in the American Bachram in yeshivas, now in this time of year when Eretz Yisrael says the Saint Talumatar, Chutz Aretz does not, he would say it in the Saint in Shema Kolenu. You're not a real Ben Eretz Yisrael. Say in Shema Kolenu the Saint Talumatar Libnei Eretz Yisrael. We might have mentioned this in the past, and this is where we see this idea from, that when you're a Yach, when you're not the old Sibur, then you say it in Shema Tefillah. Of course, many argue in I don't want to say the more prevalent opinion, but many or most people, indeed, even if they're us here in yeshiva, say it in Baruch Aleinu. Says the Gemara, Meisvei. The Gemara asks on Rabbi, Amar Rabbi Yehuda. 5 lines into the wide lines. When do we say that the fast beginning Kislev, like our Mishnah said, is only when everything is normal? The Shanim are Kitikunan, the years are in the place, and Yisrael is living in their lands. However, nowadays everything is different. Everything goes according to the year. Everything goes according to the Zman. And what's the Raya? That just like the tiniest could be different, so too, where would you say V'sein Talumatar? In Baruch Aleinu. What was Rebbe's question? We need rain in the summer, but Tkufas Tammuz, what should we do? So the Gemara now is saying, not like you, Rebbe, said in Shemei Tefillah, but rather, you should say it in V'sein Talumatar, because nowadays it just goes by the time and the place. Amar Lei responds 1 second, Masnita Remita Lei to Rebbe. You're asking a Mishnah on Rebbe. Rebbe Tanu Balik. Rebbe could argue on a Mishnah. Says the Gemara, you're right. My Avelah was the Maskana of Nachman Amar Berch Sashanim, which is on Shemei Tefillah, Be'elchasa, B'Shemei Tefillah. So that's 2 times today. If you want to remember Daf Yudala, 2 times we had a machlekes whether you do it in Shemei Tefillah or elsewhere. The first machlekes was, where do we say Anenu? In Shemei Tefillah or between Gula and Refuah. And there we said a machlekes, and the Psak Halacha was Shemei Tefillah. Now again, we have a machlekes when a place is a unique pattern of rain, and they need rain at another time. When do you say a Baruch Aleinu or Shemei Tefillah? Says the Gemara machlekes, and the maskana is in Shemei Tefillah. Continues the Gemara. We're about 10 lines into the wide lines, the 2 dots. B'sheni on Monday, Matinim Chashech Mishi Kol Hayom Nekavat Shabbos. We're in the next series of fast days where we're starting to close the stores. But we said on Monday we keep the door open a crack at nighttime in case someone needs something to eat. And on Thursday we leave the door open for Kavod Shabbos. Says the Gemara, Ibailu, we have a shayla. Hey Chikotani Bebeis Matinim Chashech. What exactly is the precise reading of the Mishnah? Do you read the Mishnah that on Monday Bebeis Matinim Chashech you keep the door open ajar as it gets dark, and on Thursday, Kol Hayom Nekavat Shabbos, And on Thursday, what do? You keep the door ajar, open a little bit, cause of Kavod Shabbos, but you do it the whole day. On Monday, you keep the door open a little bit. And on Thursday, you open it all the way for Kavod Shabbos. So the fundamental shayla, because of Kavod Shabbos, you're allowed to keep the doors open on a Thursday. Does that allow you to keep it open a crack, or does it allow you to keep it open entirely? Says the Gemara, the price explains explicitly. On Monday, you open a little bit at evening with Chamishi. We see clearly that on Thursday, what do? On Thursday, you open the door entirely for Kavod Shabbos. So continues this price. Let's say the store had two doors. You open one and you close one. It had a bench that's usually put in front of the door. You open the door and you don't have to be worried that it's going to be messing people up that are walking by. And that is the next din in the Mishnah that we learned, that as much as you close the stores, what do? On Monday you open a little bit, on Thursday you open entirely. Why? When they cover Shabbos, people have to come buy their food for Shabbos. And now we continue. These finished and they were not answered. The Mishnah said, what do next? We decrease business, we decrease building, we decrease planting. Says the Gemara Tana, we learned in the Mishnah. We're about 15 lines to the bottom of the Amid. We're going to see a little bit more, and then we're going to call it a day. Tana, binyan shal simcha, netiya shal simcha, building for a simcha or planting for a simcha. What does that mean? No, that refers to making a wedding house for the child, and they also point out, but of course, this is similar to halachas of like the 9 days. If you have nowhere else to make the wedding, then it would be allowed. What's the case of planting of simchas? That's the case you plant a tree for the kings. Now, what's an avarniki shamlachim? Very, very interesting over here. Rashi, on the second wide line, Rashi points out, third wide line, they would plant these trees for shade, so too over here, shel simcha. Actually, I wanted to read the previous Rashi. The previous Rashi one more time. I'm sorry. The first wide line says, what would they do when a child was born to the king? They would plant a tree, and the day that the child became king, they would use his tree to make him a throne. Gishmak was his private tree, and they would make his throne from it. The other lashon is that it was a big tree that they used for shade. Let's do a job further. It said we should not greet cheerfully one another. When it's Talmidei Chachamim, you don't talk to each other. But let's say an Amaretz comes and talks to you. What are you going to do? You answer him gruffly. You answer him in a solemn manner. You answer him in a more serious way. You put on their towels. They sit like Avelim, like as if you're in Chayrim Chas V'Shalom to Hashem. Until you have Rachamim from Shamayim. And the truth is, we're going to stop over here, Amar Rav Elazar, because tomorrow is a bit of a shorter daf, and we'll pick it up for Amar Rav Elazar, Mirz Hashem, in the next year.